friends, I'm Michael from the Buddhist temple in Rio de Janeiro, and today I'm going to make a video about a controversial subject. In the previous video with Edom, we discussed together the question of these mythical people who would have sworn to make us all drool on earth, the Edomites. Did they really exist? Are they still on world stage? Are they a legend or reality? It's up to you. Do you know one or several in your circle? You may be one. Since it's a question of genetic heritage, watch out, as they say, the closest do not make the man. If you are one, don't cry. Come to the Buddhist temple in Rio de Janeiro or call simply Lama Kuzan. He will tell you what to do to get out of trouble. Today I propose you to go up with me in the time machine. We'll go back in the time by leaning on the considerable work that the School of Egyptology of the great Senegalese scholar Sheikh Anta Diop has left. We will understand how the Edomites were light-skinned people, the Caucasians as they are called, and all the mixed-race Semitic people invaded the great ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt, Kemet, was populated from its origin by a people of black African race. Follow me, and we'll take a closer look at the reign of the pharaoh under whom this great civilization began to fall apart. In the history I will tell you, there is a good pharaoh and there is a bad pharaoh. So do not confuse. You all know that villain Pharaoh in the Bible in chapter 1 of the book of Exodus refuses to free the Hebrew people, don't you? There are many theories about the identity of this pharaoh who would have changed the course of world history. I say it would have because unless you use the Vatican's chronovisor, it is extremely difficult to know with certainty how events took place in the second millennium before Christ. I would like to remind you that I am not a scientist, but an amateur who loves to rummage through books and the internet. So make your own opinion. I think that the pharaoh in question is most probably the pharaoh Ramses II. I think it as well for the reason the Bible confirms that the Israelites were to build supply cities called Pithom and Ramses for pharaoh. Egyptian records confirm that the kings of the 19th dynasty launched a major military program in the Levant, that is to say, the Middle East. King Seti I built a new garrison city, which his successor, Ramses II, later called P-Ramses. Ramses II also built a second city dedicated to his personal patron, Atum, called Per Atum. These two cities are quite possibly the biblical city of Ramses and Pithom. But to be very honest, there are many other candidates for the title of supervillain pharaoh of the Exodus. Some have thought of Seti I, Thutmose III. So it is necessary to take a number of precautions concerning the chronology of the Bible. What is interesting is that we found the very well-preserved mummy of Ramses II. I will pass over the fact that the research director, Dr. Maurice Bucaille, converted to Islam. He would have because of the reason that when analyzing the body, they found traces of salt indicating that the body must have drowned. Drowned in the Red Sea, as the Bible and the Quran say? The Quran talks about the drowning and the preservation of the pharaoh. So we have pictures of this mummy. But there it is, the surprise. We notice very clearly that the hairs of the pharaoh were straight and red, like those of northern Europeans, like those of Dorian Greeks, of Romans, of Edomites. The color of his skin is dark, but given the shape of his face, it is clear that he is a Semite, a half-breed and not a sheer black from Africa. He was therefore, if I may say so, what we call a patch. We notice then the discontinuity between the 18th dynasty and the 19th dynasty. The pharaohs were no longer of the same race. So what happened? It all starts with a pharaoh like no other, Amenhotep IV Akhenaten. Well, the very documented chronicles of the Egyptians themselves explain this great ethnic shift. At the head of the Egyptian throne, some centuries before Ramses II, a crisis happened. It would have taken place under the reign of the great and famous pharaoh Hellenized as Amenhotep IV Akhenaten. I take this opportunity to remind you that most of the toponyms and common names of ancient Egypt have been Hellenized by the Greeks under the Ptolemy dynasty, the last Greek dynasty before the Roman invasion, of course. You will see that those same character names and places pronounced at the Egyptian style sound much more African. This is just a small example of how the falsification of history operates. So we have heard a lot about this pharaoh like no other. The mystic pharaoh, the heretic pharaoh, the enlightened pharaoh, the megalomaniac pharaoh, the Gnostic pharaoh. Akhenaten is the only pharaoh who has been observed by historians and Egyptologists through a psychologizing reading grid. We are not going to get in this video on the brilliant Sheikh Anta work, so much it deserves a whole video. But I will tell you why I consider his school most qualified to decipher the mysterious history of the ancient Egyptians. This is a subject still polemical today, and I will explain why. Maybe because it allows us to demonstrate the way in which the Edomites, still in power today, have literally camouflaged their millennial crimes. First, it makes it possible to unmask the usurpation of racialist European Egyptology schools. Secondly, it allows us to understand the meaning, strictly speaking, of Egyptian writing, because the traditional African languages, still alive nowadays, have kept similarities with the ancient Egyptian, because they are almost the same people. In fact, we have archaeology as an exploratory mode. We also have many epigraphic sources. There is as well a lot of texts that talks about the 18th dynasty and more specifically of the Akhenaten period, the Amarnian period. Amarnian come from Tel Hamarna. There are also linguistic sources, since it is the Egyptian of the period of the Middle Empire, the richest period. There are also many diplomatic sources that have been preserved by Queen Tiye, the mother of Akhenaten. Queen Tiye was dealing with correspondence with the kinglets of the Near East. But let's go back to Akhenaten. Some claim that the peculiarity of his reign was the invention of monotheism. Some claim it was monolatry, That is to say, the belief in the existence of many gods, but with the consistent worship of only one deity. Some people think that Akhenaten invented a brand new religion called the Hatton religion. Some believe that Akhenaten was associated with his religious reform of artistic innovations. Some think that Akhenaten was a mystic but not a statesman, as if the pharaoh were statesmen. Are we sure they were? Not really. Akhenaten would have been a mystic who spent his time in prayer and left his country threatened by outside peoples. The truth is that Akhenaten was a pacifist king. Some say that he was irresponsible because he substitutes for prayer the need to protect his territory from foreign peoples, which is part of the regal duties of all kings, isn't it? Some believe that Pharaoh Akhenaten made possible the emergence in Egypt of revealed religions, in particular Judaism. Now I must raise again an important problem: the institutional racism of European and especially French Oriental studies. With rare exceptions, such as Jean-François Champollion, by example. The Hammurabian period was a pivotal period for the falsification of the history of ancient Egypt. For the end of the reign of Akhenaten has brought Egypt to a crisis. A structural crisis, an institutional crisis, a racial crisis. These intermediate or supposed intermediate periods by Egyptologists are periods of intense falsification. These systematic falsifications had already taken place at the end of the Old Empire. Why did these falsifications take place? Greeks, Romans, Hebrews, and Arab sources are unanimous. On one point, the first men were the Ethiopians with long lives. There were Ethiopians of the rising, that is to say, Sudanese, Nubians. The ancient Egyptians were from Nubia. These peoples settled in Nubia were only a fraction of an original people who came from the mounts of the moon, in actual Rwanda and Congo. They were called Ethiopians of the setting. From the sources of the Nile to the delta and the shores of the Mediterranean, they came from Nubia. All were unanimous in saying that the Egyptians were at the origin of sciences, arts, and techniques, and all the religious beliefs on earth. These are the causes of the falsification. Arabs and Europeans, in particular, could not afford to reduce to slavery a people who had once taught them everything. So they rewrote history with bleach. Now will I discuss in this video the theme of the Atlantean origin of the knowledge of the Egyptian. For from whom did the Atlanteans have their knowledge? Inhabitants of the continent of Mu? And from whom did the inhabitants of the island of Mu get their knowledge? Hyperboreans? And from whom the Hyperboreans? Etc., etc., etc. For all these reasons, I would not address the question of levitating granite blocks, the creation of flying machines, the question of free energy, electromagnetism, questions of crystal science, questions of extraterrestrial intervention, etc., etc. For I consider that a critical historical point of view, even if it is not perfect, will avoid many inaccuracies that benefit the New Age racialist adepts of theosophy and anthroposophy. This current must be definitely considered as National Socialist esotericism. On the other hand, I consider that all traditional religions and Gnostic wisdom should be considered as invaluable testimonies of wisdom and knowledge of the ancients. By example, the Hebrews say that Moses was initiated into the wisdom of God in Egypt. Long before the ethnic cleansing of the Arabian Peninsula by the Edomites among the Ismailis and the Jectanites, the Arabs say that it was the Egyptians and the Nubians, the Remetu, who were the guardians of the Sabians and the inhabitants of Yemen. Meanwhile, in the second millennium before Christ, the ancestors of Europeans were refrigerated and titanized in the cold of the Ukrainian and Central Asian steppes climate, dwelling in huts and in caverns, wearing animal skins, still hunting the Harok. So you understand that mythomania, in the collective memory of the West, it produced the myth of ancient White Egypt. I don't say that there wasn't a 15 Hyksos dynasty. Hyksos, this is to say Edomites, from the East Desert areas. It must have released some white blood therefore among the native population. But we cannot forget that Kemet, from its origin, was a dark African type people. Jean-François Champollion saw it with his own eyes. He saw in the Valley of the Kings that the Egyptians were black, the race of excellent men. Champollion said it himself about the paintings of the Bilal el-Muluk, of the Valley of the Kings. I am ashamed, but the right race is one of the last races among the hierarchy of races of the time. These white-skinned peoples did not know the one God. They did not know monotheism. For the Edomites, inbred with Japhetic and Canaanite people, to resume for the so-called Indo-Europeans, Caucasians, the pantheon is made up of demons, geniuses, and supermen, monsters, giants, struggling with gods. For the Egyptians, the divine energy, Ra, is unique in its essence, even if its manifestations are multiple. Its multiple manifestations are waves and corpuscular hypostasis, as evidenced by recent discoveries in quantum physics. I am one who becomes two. I am four who becomes eight, octoad. I am one after this one. I become the Ennead. I am Osiris. I am Ra, energy in its uniqueness. I am Ptah, the architect. I am Hamon, the invisible. I am Apis, the sacrificed and reborn. This evokes an infinite cycle, like the spiral vibration in Pygmies and Dogons' spirituality. In Greek, theos is the unique essence, but Egyptian Haton is the fusion of the male and female principle, God. The woman is in the divine from the beginning with the man. Ptah is the creative principle. Thoth, Jeuti, is the one born. The man begets, but it is the woman who bears alive as the fruit of creation until it matures. Hence the importance in African cultures of matrilineality and breastfeeding. This synthesis explains how, from the known, the primordial chaos, the universe was structured to the soul of what? The underground world where mummies live. There is Ptato, it's the earth surrounded. There is Note, it's the vault of even. There is Pet, it's the sky. That's Egyptian religion cosmology. The Egyptians already knew the one good Hammon, the hidden, what bigger than Neteru has Horus, Isis, Osiris. And this is like Yahweh, Allah, who created the angels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, etc. One said this: at the time all Egyptian sciences were taught in 5 major centers: Yunu school, the sacrificial receptacle of Osiris, that the Greeks called later Heliopolis; Kemenu school, that the Greeks called later Hermopolis Magna; the sanctuary of Menuphe, which became Memphis; the sanctuary of Uase, which became Thebes; the shrine of Sau, which became Sai. These are the priests of these shrines who formed Thales, Pythagoras, Eudox, Plato, Aristotle.